Flamina! Is this real? Could this really be happening? It has to be a dream. So many switch ports. So many beautiful switch ports. That's too many. That's too many ports. They're everywhere. They're all over. That's too many ports. No, you can stop now. No, there's too many there. No! Ah! No, it's not a dream. The avalanche of ports coming to Switch threatens to crush us all. It did not take long before indies started flooding the eShop, and they've continued to do so since the system's launch. But now, on top of that, bigger third-party publishers have joined the party. Now, not even a single Nintendo Direct can go by without about 19,000 ports being announced. This last one in particular was positively packed with announcements. Indeed, the Switch has become a little port machine. And while at first there seemed to be some pushback from people who see ports as bad things for a number of reasons that I don't really understand, now it's pretty much unanimous. GOG, isn't it awesome that we can play all these cool games on the go? So today I'd like to talk a little about how it is indeed awesome and take a good look at both the Switch's current status as a haven for ports and its potential in the future. Will this flood keep up? Might things be different a few years from now? Will we get a port of Shadow Complex? Because come on, right? Like, it's like the most obvious port in the world. Where is Shadow Complex? First, let's talk about the kind of port that helped launch the Switch into space in 2017 and has continued to bolster its library ever since, the Wii U port. There's no need to go over each of them, I've covered them all a bunch by now, and also, it would save more time to talk about the Wii U games that haven't been ported to the Switch, because I tell you, that number is small and getting smaller all the time. There are barely any viable games left to port. Yoshi's Woolly World doesn't seem super likely since it might compete with Crafted World, so probably not anytime soon at least. Kirby and the Rainbow Curse is so touch-heavy that getting a port is pretty doubtful. Paper Mario Color Splash, Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival, and Star Fox Zero were so controversial and sold so poorly that it's hard for me to believe that ports would be wise. Xenoblade Chronicles X, Wonderful 101, and Pikmin 4, on the other hand, are three games that could really use second chances on the Switch, and if you ask me, Super Mario 3D World is an absolute inevitability. It is coming, it's just a matter of time. So for the remaining Wii U titles, you've got one definitely and a handful of maybes. The rest of the Wii U's biggest games, nearly all of them have already been ported or they ended up getting sequels instead. And this is terrific. I even had a Wii U, but I missed a lot of these games the first time around, whether because I didn't have time for them or I wasn't really interested until playing on the go and reviewing and such became things. And of course, most people didn't have Wii U's, and to them, these games have all been brand new. They've finally been able to enjoy the genius of Tropical Freeze and the beauty and thrill of Mario Kart 8 and the black hole time obliteration of Hyrule Warriors. Jeez, man, Nintendo shouldn't even be shy about it at this point. They should just stop beating around the bush and port the rest. Just like all at once. 3D World, Yoshi, Wonderful 101. Who cares? Just do it right now. What's the risk? Why not Color Splash and Star Fox and Amiibo Festival while you're at it? Someone will buy them, right? Nintendo may have led the charge, but once the Switch proved to be a runaway success, other companies started to get in on the action, and the number of ports hitting the Switch seems to be increasing exponentially. Capcom's been buds with Nintendo for ages now, and they've been systematically bringing batch after batch of Resident Evil games to the Switch. Square Enix, same. They are absolutely flooding the thing with Final Fantasies and Dragon Quests and Manas and more. Dragon Quest XI has garnered just about as much hype and praise as a first-party Nintendo game. Ubisoft kinda hesitated at first, which is surprising considering their relationship with Nintendo, but now they're finally bringing over a good amount of stuff, including multiple Assassin's Creed games. Bethesda's support has been the biggest surprise so far, obviously. They gave us Skyrim, which feels like the kind of game that was made for the Switch, as well as the extremely action-heavy and thus extremely surprising Doom, Wolfenstein 2, and Wolfenstein Youngblood. Recently, they ported over all the classic Doom games as well, including the highly sought-after Doom 64, so they're giving Switch players a lot of options on the Doom front. Also, recently, we've gotten some really nice surprise announcements. Okay, I use the word surprise very loosely, as literally every single one has been leaked ahead of time, but the fact that they're coming to the Switch at all is the surprise. Namely, the biggest ones are Overwatch and The Witcher 3. People have been begging for the former since forever, and other multiplayer shooters seem to be doing really well on the system, and the latter was just a total left field, very pleasant surprise. I actually had The Witcher 3 on my list of third-party games I want ported to Switch, but more than anything else on the list, I didn't actually expect it. It's a massive, beautiful game from a company that has basically zero history with Nintendo as far as I can tell. Such a thing seemed like a pie-in-the-sky dream, but it's happening. It's actually happening, and from the look of it, the port job is coming along pretty darn good. Funny thing is, that video I did on ports I want is quickly becoming obsolete. I made it a year and a half ago, and in that time, 3 of the 7 games I listed have been ported. And there's plenty of life in the Switch yet, so who knows what else will end up coming over. Furthermore, I had a decent list going for a follow-up video, but I keep having to go and cross out titles because they're all getting ported before I can even make the stinking video. Let's see. Oh, what about Resident Evil 5? Yeah, oh, nope, yep, there's the announcement. Okay, not that one. What's next? Ooh, Castle Crashers. Yeah, that would be okay, yep. There's Castle Crashers coming too. All right, what's next? So obviously this whole port-splosion, which is a portmanteau, I might add, thank you, has been great, but that's not to say there still hasn't been some feet-dragging when it comes to bringing over third-party games. Both Ubisoft and Bethesda have overall been supportive, sorry, too far, but still a little bit more choosy about what they port over than I would expect. I was actually surprised by how long it took for Ubi to give us an Assassin's Creed game, and I'm still waiting on at least one single Far Cry game from them and one full Fallout game from Bethesda. More seriously though, some companies just don't care for the thing much at all. As I talked about recently, EA has only ported over a handful of titles, most of which are watered-down versions of the originals. Just recently, FIFA 20 was review-bombed and dragged through the mud by most outlets for being functionally identical to the previous entries, with most major features stripped away entirely. So that gives you an idea of how EA feels about the Switch. They even said that they flat out weren't interested in it and that their games weren't selling enough. I wonder why. But then they turned around and they were like, no, we're definitely looking into it as a platform. But come on. How much more massively successful does the Switch need to be? Put your money where your mouth is, port the games or don't. Then there's Rockstar. It's cool and everything that we got LA Noire, but seriously? Not even a single Grand Theft Auto game? While I was writing this, rumors started floating around about a potential GTA 3 port, and that would be something. But come on, anything that can run on last-gen hardware can run on the Switch, and GTA 5 would be a pretty darn solid seller. They've already sold an immense number of copies, but I'm sure there would be some heavy double-dipping going on if people had the option to play it on the go. It's just silliness not to make that happen, and to just give us the PS2 version instead, if that. It's interesting how many mega gaming giants are being super stingy when it comes to the Switch. They'll give the Switch like a tiny little handful of games, and maybe they'll even be really enthusiastic about those games, but they'll ignore the vast majority of their library. Like 2K games. Here you go, here's Civilization 6. Ah, cool, rad. Ah, what's next? Borderlands, Bioshock, any of that? Carnival games? Really? It's pretty funny. In observing casual discussions on the topic of Switch ports, it almost feels like the companies who don't port over their games are starting to look like jerks. You know what I mean? There's like this industry peer pressure now. It's like, dude, why don't you just put your dumb game on the Switch? It was on the 360. It would take like no effort to run it. Just do it, man. Be cool, man. I mean it though. There's like this growing animosity toward companies who don't support the system properly. If we're talking about the dark side of Switch ports though, really nothing stinks more than ports that end up disappointing for whatever reason. Resident Evil 4 was very possibly my #1 most anticipated third-party port, but despite the other excellent RE ports on Switch, it came with an unnecessarily inflated price tag, no gyro controls, and the same unfixed aiming glitch seen in other versions. I haven't picked it up, and I don't think I ever will. Massive disappointment. Then tons of people were rightfully upset to find that Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, a game they'd waited years for and even backed on Kickstarter, runs terribly on the Switch. And the developers, who have been really cool about the game's development for the most part, they pushed out the port without delaying it, despite no knowing it was a mess. Then, I know I was just happy about Assassin's Creed games a second ago, but Assassin's Creed 3 also runs really terribly, far below even the Wii U version of the same game, which someone please explain to me how that works. Oh, and who could forget Ark Survival Evolved, a game that was scaled down dramatically, with some assets just plain removed wholesale, and yet still sometimes dips down to a resolution that, no exaggeration, is even lower than that of a PS2 game. The port was bungled horribly. Sometimes companies just don't have the skill or the experience or the time or the money or, let's admit, the care to port a game the right way, or maybe a combination of those. Fortunately though, plenty of ports run on Switch with few to no big performance sacrifices, and also hesitation to bring games to the Switch is becoming more of a rarity all the time. We're getting lots of stuff from lots of different companies in lots of different series and genres, and lots of it is running just fine. And the thing is, I'd be plenty happy if the Switch was limited to playing games from last gen. It's about on par with last gen hardware, so it's totally understandable that those are the games that run best on it and are the easiest to move over. Also, last gen was phenomenal. Just so many amazing games to play, and especially for people who have mostly been into Nintendo games in the past, these ports are a great opportunity to try something new that they might have missed before. But we're lucky. Even though last gen ports are the easiest, that hasn't stopped companies from giving us at least some of the bigger, newer stuff. Doom, The Witcher 3, Overwatch, these are all current gen games. And where before I was doubtful that the Switch would be getting any multi-plat releases, now it seems like basically anything is possible. If they can put Doom on the thing, is there anything they can't put? If the Switch can run The Witcher 3, is there any open world it can't handle? Now, despite this great big porty we got going on, party. So I can't stop myself, I'm sorry. Despite all that, I cannot help but recognize that soon the landscape is going to change. Next holiday season, the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox insert awful name here will launch, kicking off the 9th generation of video game consoles. If it's already hard enough to port an 8th gen game to Switch, I imagine a 9th gen game might be next to impossible without a tremendous amount of effort. This could potentially mean that day-and-date multiplats outside of the indie space will go from being relatively rare to being basically non-existent. As I've talked about before, there's always the chance that Nintendo will come out with a more powerful Switch Pro type of thing, and companies could potentially make Switch Pro exclusive ports. I don't feel like this is likely, however, because that would fragment the user base too much and cut down on profit potential too severely. I think most likely, 2020 will be the last year for big multiplats on Switch, and those sweet Gen 9 ports won't be coming around until the next Nintendo system drops in who even knows how many years. Though hey, as usual, I'll remind you that I don't know much about this stuff, and maybe I'm wrong. I've heard that as gaming tech advances, games are becoming more and more scalable to fit on different hardware. Also, the graphical leaps between generations are getting smaller and smaller, and I would not be surprised if next gen ends up looking almost identical to this one, only with 4K resolutions and high frame rates and fast loading times thanks to solid state drives and the like. If that happens, then Switch ports very much might still be in the cards. If the new systems aren't even doing a lot more graphically, they're just running games more smoothly, then we might be okay. Just bring the resolution and frame rate down and maybe you've got something that can be ported to Switch after all. I'm trying not to get my hopes up on this front, but it's nice knowing it's at least a possibility. The real silver lining though is that even if Gen 9 ports are 100% off the table, that still leaves a whole lot of Gen 8 ports to catch up on and a tremendous gargantuan number of potential Gen 7 ports, considering the general ease of porting them without having to downscale a thing, provided you've got a good developer on the job. Like I said earlier, there are lots of people who've never had an Xbox or a PlayStation, but they want to see what the fuss is about all these games. Or they've lost touch with gaming for a generation or two before picking up a Switch. Or they have all the other systems, but they want to play stuff on the go more than anything. Or they're like me, and they've had the other systems, but still happen to miss out on a ton of great titles. There are so many reasons ports are a great thing, and so many games that could still benefit from being ported, and it's just a beautiful thing. It's just wonderful. It is an incredible luxury to be able to play all these games, new and old, from the comfort of wherever. I don't need to tell you again, I spent the first year of the Switch's life telling you, but handheld play has changed the way I play games. It's basically responsible for me playing games at all. So it's just awesome that there are so many game options now. Almost too many, in fact. Sometimes I complain about Nintendo's first-party release schedule. Good second half of the year, but pretty barren first half, that kind of thing. And I'll always complain about that when it happens, and people will always get mad at me for it, but I'll keep doing it anyway. But it doesn't sting nearly as badly thanks to the third-party support. Between indie multiplats and bigger current and last-gen ports, there is never a lack of things to play on the Switch. There's always something to buy and enjoy, and while I promised myself that I would never allow my Switch to end up like my Steam account, that exact thing has happened. Between sales and review codes and the like, my Switch is now positively bloated with games, most of which I haven't even touched. And having too many games to play is certainly a problem, but it's a problem that I am happy to have. They put Defense Grid 2 on the Switch, you guys. Like, seriously, they did it. I wanted it so bad, and they did it. Defense Grid 2. I can't even believe it. It's so good. So what do you guys think? Are you happy with the number of ports the Switch is getting? Are a lot of these old games totally new to you? Do you think too many of them run poorly to warrant a purchase? What games would you like to see hit the platform in the future? Let me know down in the comments, and you have a